Okay, yeah, so I'm Singaporean, but I've been based in SF for the past like 6 years. Flying back also for Super AI, and also really excited to share with you guys how Notion uses Notion and what's possible in Notion. So we'll wait for this to load. Cool, so how many of you guys have used Notion before or know what Notion is? Okay, cool, that's a pretty good sizable amount. So I'm gonna skip the basics and go straight into agents. And we're gonna run this presentation in Notion. Cool, so here I am today and I'm going to talk to you about what kind of agents you can build on Notion and what they can do. So we'll start with talking about an AI adoption framework that we have created. We think there's really 4 levels of how you can adopt and use AI. There's the first layer where you use AI as a thought partner. A lot of people use AI as a search replacement. You ask AI questions, it answers questions. The second level is using AI to do things, going beyond asking it for information and asking it to do things for yourself. And that's where most people are at today, and that's where most people are stuck, right? There's actually 2 more levels beyond that. The first is using AI as a teammate, using it to represent several workflows and executing on the workflows. And the ultimate level you could reach is using AI as part of your system. You know, AI isn't just doing work, it's a self-learning system that compounds and improves itself the more you use your agents. So how do we ensure that your agents have the right context, permissions, and like the place to act? We think Notion is like the best place for it. I'm biased, I work at Notion. But you need all these pieces to have good agents that not only represent workflows, but also can learn and improve itself. So we'll go through it and how it works, and I'll give you an example of like why that works great for Notion. So for those of you who may not know about Notion or have no Notion but have not used all the features, there's a whole set of features that we have that enable you to build great agents and agentic workflows. And this goes from like AI meeting notes, you know, if you have meetings, take that context, put it in a shared workspace so that agents have that context as well. You have databases, you know, you can have all sorts of relational data in your workspace so that agents can work off of it. And the latest release that we have, the Notion Dev platform, allows you to go beyond just your Notion workspace and bring in data from outside of Notion. So I'm going to walk you through a basic setup of Notion's custom agents. This is just to put the rest of the demo in context. So this is the setup screen that you would have when you try to build a Notion custom agent. There are 3 main sections to any agent that you build, right? The first is the trigger. When does the agent run? Is it when you get a new message? Is it when you get a new email? Is it when a new order record is created? The second thing is the instruction itself. When it runs, what is it actually trying to do, right? Is it trying to triage your email? Is it trying to tag your emails? Is it trying to respond to someone? And the last bit, which is perhaps the most underrated bit if you want a workspace for humans and agents, is tools and access. What does it actually have access to? Because you're not going to have an agent in production with access to every single thing. You know, that goes beyond like the workflow of what it needs, and that's how you end up with agents that delete your production databases. So in specific workflows, you want your agents to have like access to specific things, and all of that is customizable within Notion. So the use case I'm going to talk about today is related to product feedback, right? Product feedback routing. If you get product feedback, how do you get the right feedback to the right teams, right? If you're a larger company like Notion, we have over 1,000 people, there's a lot of teams. And we've decided that the friction really is in giving feedback. So we have one big Slack channel where the entire company is in, and everyone gives feedback into that single channel. But you now have the downstream problem of, well, if all that feedback is there, as a team that owns a surface area, how do I find the feedback that's relevant to myself, right? Am I expected to read every single message? That's quite a lot, right? But that was how we operated pre-AI. And so there were several challenges to like making this scalable and repeatable, right? Every time feedback is given, which team owns which product area? Where do I give it? If I want to give feedback to the team, which channel do they manage? How do I even make a ticket for the team, right? Can I go beyond just giving the feedback in a channel that may get neglected? How do I make a ticket for them? And if I want to document this entire process, where does this document live? And if this document is out of date, who's going to update that document? Like, I think we've all hit those kind of operational problems. It's very tedious. This sucks, and this was pre-AI. And with AI, a lot of this has been solved. And we'll walk through how the agent kind of does all of this magically for you. I still feel it's magical, even though I've lived with it for like 2 years now. Cool, so here's a demo of like an actual piece of feedback I've given into the channel, right? I go to the channel and I'm like, hey, I found a URL on one of our Help Center articles, and the URL is broken. We should fix that. It has a broken link to this link, right? And I don't know which team owns this. I don't know which team will update it, but this is the agent replying, right? So I posted at 1:11, replied at 1:13. In the span of 2 minutes, it was able to find out, hey, thanks for flagging this. I've made a ticket for you, and I've posted it to the team the right team that owns the piece of feedback that you've given. It's private here, which is also very interesting to note because it means that the team has like a channel for feedback that I don't have access to, but the agent does. And so the agent can still do the work on my behalf, even though I personally don't have access. So this is one way where the agent does the work. We'll go into the internals of like how this was built in a bit. The other showcase I would want to show as well is like, well, that was the happy part, right? You might ask, what happens if the agent doesn't work? So if the agent doesn't work, it actually just asks you, right? So there's a piece of feedback here. You can kind of gloss over it, but what I really want to show you is the bottom piece, right? The feedback router is here. Thanks, quick routing question. I don't actually know which team this goes to. So it's like, you know, I have a rough idea of which team it might be. Is it team A or is it team B, right? Where should I give it to? And the way you update your agent here is actually pretty simple. Michael here knows which team the feedback should go to, and so this is actually the bottom of the same thread. He just replied, Eng team collections experience. He made a bunch of comments as well, like for the human who gave that reply, but the agent is able to interpret his messages in context and be like, oh, cool, it goes to that team. So I made a task and I forwarded it to the right team, right? So here is kind of like a demonstration of how you can have an agent setup that learns as it operates. And it can be as simple as just like replying to it in the thread. If you imagine a world where we did not have agents, let's say this was not an actual agent and this was someone's job to triage all their feedback. They would have this gigantic document that they would have to maintain and keep up to date and like manually check every time they want to triage messages. That is actually how the agent works. And it does it all for you automatically. So under the hood, if the agent has, for example, 500 different product areas, the human will look at that document and goes like, that's crazy. I'm not gonna go through like a 500 like line list to figure out which team goes to, right? But an agent can. An agent can do inhuman amounts of work and improve itself along the way. And so earlier I gave you guys a kind of showcase of like how an agent is set up. So this is the setup for the Notion feedback router that I just talked about, right? In the trigger, you can see on the third line, message posted in all product feedback chatter, right? So basically anytime someone gives a piece of feedback, the agent runs. And what does it do when it runs? So if you see in instructions, there's a whole bunch of instructions here, but I would like to highlight the routing rules page. And so in its instructions, it's basically, hey, your goal is to triage the messages, to send them to the right teams, to make a ticket. There's also a bunch of instructions about, you know, if you don't know, please ask. And if someone teaches you, keep it up to date in the routing rules page. The routing rules page is really interesting because when we first started with this agent, the routing rules page was actually empty. So we just gave the agent a goal. Your goal is to do X, Y, Z. Here's how you do it. But we tricked it. We gave it an empty page. So when we first ran this agent, you could imagine in the first 2 weeks, every single thread where it replied wasn't helpful at all because every single reply was, I don't know how to do this. Which team, which product area? But I think this kind of highlights building good agentic workflows is that even if you start from zero, if you keep using it in a good feedback loop, the agent gradually learns and covers all the gaps. So I can say with confidence, like 90% of messages that go into the channel do get triaged and do go to the right team. And 10% of the time when it doesn't know, we'll teach it and it'll learn. No human will want to run this process because it's like entirely manual and like a lot of document to kind of a lot of documentation to keep up to date, but an agent can and an agent will. And in fact, the agent is great with the work that it's doing and everyone loves it because now I don't have to monitor this gigantic channel. I can just monitor my team's own channel and any feedback that's relevant to my team will arrive in my channel. So we talked a lot about what agents can do on Notion. If you read between the lines, we also had integrations with Slack, which was how the agent was triggered. We work primarily with like Slack and Notion. You might not, right? So we've had people in the past come to us with, we use different text apps or like communications apps that's not Slack. How do you let Notion work with our apps? And so recently we had a new Notion release called Notion.dev. It's a very cool UI here, like our design team spent a lot of time on this, but Notion Dev platform really has like 4 features that we're going to talk through that I would say allows Notion to go beyond just Notion and allow you to integrate with any app, any agents, and any external services that you want to do your work around. So you no longer have to be, everything needs to be on Notion for it to work. You can use Notion in tandem for other things. So for example, if you have an ERP system, you're not going to build your ERP system on Notion, right? But you can have Notion integrated with your ERP system in a way that streamlines all your operations for all the members on your team. So this first feature in the Dev platform is what we call sync tools. If you have data outside of Notion that's useful, but in the past was not available in Notion, you would think, hey, do I have to build my own custom integration to get data in? Do I have to build some kind of Zapier workflow to get like data into Notion? Or can I do work to get data from Notion out of Notion into other systems? That has traditionally been something you have to figure out on your own, but now you can kind of build it pretty simply on top of Notion's Dev platform. So some use cases that we have here is like with Zendesk, if we use Zendesk as a customer support like triage software, and we have a lot of tickets in them, can I get that ticket information into Notion? Why would I want to do that, you would say, right? Like customer support lives in Zendesk, why would I want to do that? Well, because that information is useful not just for customer support. So if I take a lot of customer support tickets and sync it to Notion, I actually now enable other teams to work off that data source as well. So one very common use case, if I'm trying to make product decisions to figure out what to optimize, how many users are actually using something, I now have access within Notion with Notion AI to query my customer support tickets. How many people have actually complained about this feature? When should I prioritize this? In the past, I would have to figure out how to use Zendesk or figure out how to prioritize this ask with my customer support team. But now I don't. That data is within Notion, and I can query all of that myself. The second feature in the Dev platform that's really cool is what we call worker tools. The way I would describe this, and the way worker tools really work is you're writing small bits of JavaScript, and honestly, who writes code nowadays? You're most probably going to vibe code small bits of JavaScript out. And the cool thing is, these can be thin wrappers over any API service you want to use. So if you have an external service that has an API, but Notion doesn't have first-party integrations for, and this could be, it's not because we don't want to integrate, it might be some custom service that you have internally that no one's ever going to build APIs for, you can now build that for yourself. So we have customers who have like small in-house applications that they want to keep using, and they've never been able to integrate with other platforms. It's a whole thing to have to figure out how to write code to glue systems together. Notion now supports that natively. And the coolest way this could work is that it kind of unfolds itself as an MCP or like API access for Notion AI's agent. So I could do something like, I used to run the SEO program at Notion, right? And so I would have a bunch of pages that I maintain, and I want to track how much traffic my pages are getting, right? There's 2 ways I could do it now. I could have a sync job to pull data from Google Analytics, for example, pull it into Notion and query it. Or I could have API access set up for my agent. So whenever I need the data, Notion's AI agents can query those endpoints on demand. People have also done pretty fun things with this that's not for work. I have a coworker who's like, I like to plan my meals for my nutritional macros in Notion. And the next thing is he has to figure out what to order. Well, now he has AI, his Notion AI integrated with Instacart APIs. So he can go beyond planning and just say, order my groceries for next week, and Notion AI with the tools that he built for his AI agents is able to do that and like order his groceries for himself. So the sky's the limit on like what kind of integrations you want to do with the APIs into any system that you want. You can also bring your favorite agent into Notion. So Notion AI isn't going to be the only AI that you use, right? As an engineer myself, I use Codex, I use Claude Code, and I'm never going to use Notion to generate code. Maybe in a future world, but today I still prefer to do my coding in Codex and Claude Code. And so I have a pretty awkward way of working where every time I load up Codex or Claude Code, I have a skill to be like, go to my project page, load all these like documents and context so that any request I give to it is me in kind of in context, right? It knows the context of the project I'm working on before making any code changes. That's kind of clunky. And it actually only works for me as an engineer because my product managers, for example, do not use Claude or Codex to make code changes. And I've always wondered, is there a world where I could work in Notion on the product spec with them, and when I'm ready, have that trigger off into code? Because if I'm using a coding agent to make my code, I'm not actually looking at code most of the time until like it's done and at the end of it, right? So why do I have to work within an IDE? With manage agents in Notion, that changes, right? So today, I can go within Notion, work on the product spec with my product manager, and when we're happy with the requirement of the work, we just dispatch that work through Notion AI. We're like, hey, this piece of work is ready to be coded. Can you hand it off to a coding agent? Make the PR, make it ready, make it pass all CI, and then give me the draft PR to review at the end of it. I don't have to leave Notion until I actually have to look at the code, which is, I think, a huge deal for why you should be using Notion AI instead of just the MCP. The last bit of why this is really cool is that you're not going to do all your work in Notion. If you're knowledge workers, you probably are, but not every part of your company is just within Notion. There are operational bits that do start from other systems that you use. So here are some examples of like the systems that will trigger it. But the core idea here is when workflows start outside of Notion, you want it to be able to trigger workflows within Notion, right? Not everything is a pull from within Notion. I'm not starting within Notion and like pulling information elsewhere. I want to be able to push into Notion and start workflows. And so here with some of the examples, it's like maybe Greenhouse, you're a recruiter and a candidate has signed an offer. I want to kickstart a bunch of workflows in Notion. Maybe we should prepare a candidate onboarding doc the moment they've signed the offer, right? You can now do that with Worker webhooks. So you will start from an existing external platform. It will call a webhook on Notion and trigger a series of workflows within Notion. So it's not just pulling, it's also pushing. And yeah, kind of tying it all together, with all these features in Notion, there are several layers that you need to make, turn your AI into agents that work for you, but also improve on themselves, right? So if you start at kind of the agent layer, that's the most interesting thing to most people nowadays, right? I build agents, I have connected agents, it's LLM agnostic, but then you actually ask yourself, if I'm making just a bunch of markdown files on my computer, I'm not sharing that knowledge with my team. And so that goes into the collaboration layer, right? If I'm trying to build any workflow or I have any documents, how can I share that with the rest of my team? Because I'm not running a solo startup. I'm running projects as a team. And you go all the way down to a bunch of things that most of us actually don't think about when we're running workflows locally, which is that you actually need permissions and versioning of the data and workflows that you have. You need governance of your data. So for example, earlier in the demo, you saw that the agent had access to a private channel, but I didn't, and it was still able to do its work. I'm able to do that because Notion has the tools and access systems set up for it. If you were to try and vibe code this for yourself on Claude and figure out like, how do I share this workflow with my team? That's actually a it's not a small thing to fix, and a thing that a lot of people overlook. So yeah, to use agents well as a team, you actually need a lot of all these governance features surrounding your agent content. And I'll wrap up this session with asking you guys a bunch of questions to think about, right? If you're wondering what kind of agents you can build on top of Notion, but also on your own without Notion, right? I think a good way to think about agents that work well for you, the first question is, what are you a bottleneck for, and how can your agents represent you? An example of how I've used Notion features to make this happen is that I have product areas I'm responsible for as an engineer that I make code changes for, but I don't want to be a bottleneck because every feature request that comes in has to go through me to get implemented. And let's face it, most of the time when a new feature comes in, the first thing I'm going to do is dump it into my coding agent to get a prototype, right? So can I go beyond that and enable other people to make prototypes? And so for my project specifically, I have a custom agent that my non-technical peers can talk to create a PR for me to review. So even up front, before I review it, they're able to iterate with the coding agent to create a prototype that fits their requirements, and then I go look at it to make it fit my engineering standards. So that saves us a lot of like back and forth time. The second thing is, how do you encode knowledge sharing across your team so everyone improves at the same tasks? What I mean here is, for example, in my project, again, if let's say I take my SEO project as an example, right? I have a way to set up landing pages with the appropriate tracking so that we can track attribution for those pages. I'm not the only person who's going to need to make those changes. Other people are also going to need to want to make pages, right? I would like a world where I take all my knowledge and code it in an agent, and when other people make agents, make new pages, it leverages the knowledge that I have, and it does work to the best quality that I can do. And so as you build agents, you also have to think about how do you encode that in your agent so that when people use them, it's repeatable work that improves. So if I improve my agent, it benefits the next person who uses it. If they improve it and I use it in the future, it improves for us. We're not doing workflows in our local computers that's not shared. We're doing workflows in a shared environment that improves whenever anyone improves it, and we all benefit from it. And I think the last bit here is kind of like raise the bar in human execution and in human quality. What I kind of mean by this is, if you took the example of the triaging agent, you would never have hired a single person to be 24/7 in the Slack channel triaging every single message, right? You'll be like, we have 1,000 people. There's no way I know like where every product lives. But now with an agent, you can. Right? It's a single agent. It's not a whole team of agents. It's a single agent managing all of it. And in fact, if you think about how the agent works, right? Under the hood, there's actually a document of like which product areas map to which team. That's also work. That's also knowledge that's relevant to other use cases. So for example, why not go beyond just triaging product feedback internally into the right teams? Could I also take customer support tickets, leverage that same kind of knowledge of like which team owns which parts, and forward the right customer support tickets to the right teams, right? So the same pieces of knowledge you create for your workflows can compound beyond the workflows you originally started with. And the coolest thing about this is if you build agentic workflows this way, you kind of have one single source of truth for all the similar workflows. You don't end up with every team having their version of like sources of truth that diverge over time. So yeah, that's kind of like my demo for today. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Nicholas. And while we get Alison to come up and set up, we'll continue. Yeah, Nicholas. Any questions for Nicholas? Any immediate questions on this? Yes, sir.
I'm coming from the education side, so
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm more interested about the sites. So how does it work from a workflow? And I'm a pretty beginner as well.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah,
No worries.
just very clear.
What do you mean by sites?
So there's Notion sites.
Yep.
Right. So how, as a beginner, could I delve into that and develop my own agentic workflows or systems?
So Notion Sites isn't, okay, so Notion has a lot of features. Notion Sites is one of the things we do. It's not necessarily relevant to agents. So what Notion Sites is a feature where you could publish a page. You know how like if you have Google Docs and you can share it to the entire web, Notion Sites is kind of like a similar feature, but you publish it on your own custom domain. So you could build websites with Notion. They're not necessarily for agents per se, but you could leverage it in interesting ways. So for example, I know of use cases where people want to share their agentic workflows, right? And so what they do in their Notion workspace is like, well, I'm not going to invite everyone into my workspace. What they do is they take some of the instructions and setup for their agents, they put it in a page, and they publish the page as a website page, and then they share it out on LinkedIn, like, hey, this is the setup for my agent, and if you want to do the same agent for yourself, you can visit my website and duplicate it to your own Notion workspace and set up your own agent. So that's one way you could use Notion sites for that. I wouldn't say it's like an agentic feature per se. Yeah.
No, but that answers perfectly.
Okay.